Danny Ma, what's going on?
Hey Joe, great to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
likewise.
having me on.
Of course, of course. So we got Danny Ma with Data with Danny. Do you want to give a quick intro for the three people in the world who don't know who you are?
Yeah, sure thing. So, hi everyone. My name is Danny. I think me and Joe call ourselves recovering data scientists. But I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I've been in the data industry for the past, I'd say around like 9, 10 years now. And I've kind of gone through almost all the data roles that are possible. So from like an analyst all the way doing campaign analytics, predictive analytics, lots of like salesy sorts of stuff, all the way through to working in data science, deploying machine learning models, working in data engineering, doing some cloud engineering as well. And then in the past year and a half or so, I started to move more into, let's call it the education space, to try and help build out strong communities for data professionals so we can all kind of work together and improve our skills. And now I'm just working for myself as part of the Data with Danny initiative, where I'm starting to produce some online courses and just continue spreading positivity and let's call it good good feelings and stuff in the data community. So that's what I'm focused on right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and walk me through what you've been working on recently. It seems like you're working on a lot of cool stuff with respect to courses and related.
Yeah, so around this time last year, so we were like, what are we now? March, beginning of March or so. I started feeling in my career working as like a contracting data scientist, machine learning engineer, that I wasn't having as much impact and kind of like I was helping out with the business, but I didn't feel that I was contributing back to society or actually helping people on an individual basis. So in my mind, I decided, okay, let's try and. I've always thought about posting more on LinkedIn and sharing my thoughts and experiences with other people. So I just kind of jumped in and started doing it. So I was posting on LinkedIn. Um, Back then, I actually didn't think that I'd start a business around this whole like educating people and doing whatever. I just wanted to share as much knowledge as I can, partly to, I think in one side of it, it was to demonstrate my knowledge. So then other people would know that I know stuff. I think back now that I look back on it, it's kind of like a little bit shallow and self-centered sort of thing. But that was where I started off, and I wanted to kind of make a name for myself or something around something like that, right? And then over time, I realized that that strategy and having that whole thing, like everything about me, was not really working. And then I made the mental flip of the switch to say, okay, how about I stop trying to help myself and I try and help other people? So then I think instantly, almost overnight, my next few posts in like the following week were just instantly better. And then I had like a breakthrough moment where I was offering personalized mentorship to people through LinkedIn or through whatever avenue I just made a post. And then this was like at 10 p.m. at night, and I wasn't expecting much response. Like maybe 50 people, 20, 50 people might be interested in actually hearing back from me. So I went to sleep, and then I woke up in the morning. And there were like 1,500 people who were interested, like who
Oh,
commented on the post. So the post just kind of blew up, which was kind of fun. And that
so,
kind of led me down the whole path of, okay, I have so many people. How do I contact them? So my partner challenged me to like, oh, just do a survey. A survey is good. People like doing surveys. So I spent the next few days trying to build out a good survey that covered what sorts of questions and challenges that people were facing. And then from there, I sent out the survey. I think it was over LinkedIn as well. I wasn't expecting, so out of the 1,500 people who replied to the first post, I was expecting maybe 200 people, or there should be like a huge drop off between like the people who were interested and the people who actually follow through and do the survey. After 1 week, I had over 1,000 people do the survey. So
what?
it was like a really high, let's call it a conversion rate or whatever the funnel is. Um, yeah, it was super interesting. And then from there, so I was smart enough to include some field that captured people's emails. So I started building out like the holy grail for all online influencers, which is like a big email list. So after 1 week, I had 1,000+ people on my email list, which is
Nice.
amazing. And from there, I thought, okay, how can I better service this community that I'm trying to build? And the next logical step was to try and um, spin up like a Slack community. So the funny thing is, I was looking at reviews for some of the different online education platforms, and some of the reviews were like hit and miss. Some were saying good things, some were saying bad things. Some of the comments were obviously paid for, or someone affiliated was making a comment. But overall, like a lot of the biggest positives for a lot of the online course platforms was their community that they were building. So people would say, "Oh, the course content is average, like it's okay," but the best thing is the Slack community where everyone's like reacting to good news or helping out with questions and different things like that. So I thought, okay, why don't I try and build one and see how many people join and try and grow it organically from there. So I did that in about July last year. And then now it's March. I think we've got over 2,200 people or something, which
Wow.
is phenomenal. It's really amazing. Um, and yeah, hopefully it can grow a bit more. But I essentially have been fostering that community, doing more live streams on YouTube, LinkedIn, making lots and lots of weird data memes that people seem to like, sharing free Udemy courses. And then over time, I realized, okay, if I wanted to do this in the long term and I wanted to do it sustainably, and I really wanted to dedicate my all into actually helping people and working individually, I need to figure out a way to sustain myself financially because I can't. I found it really difficult to actually balance. Okay, I'm working on a contracting gig.
Mm.
It's like a 9 to 5, relatively challenging work. How can I manage both at the same time? And I just realized that something had to give. So in about August last year, things kind of lined up and I just rolled off my last contract and just started doing this data with Danny thing full time. Um, so a few people have reached out and asked me, oh, can you help me with XYZ project or something like
Mm.
contracting day rate? I essentially told them, oh, I'd love to, but I'm going to focus on this for a little while and just make it work. But yeah, in the past few months, I've recently launched my first online course called
Nice.
Serious SQL. It's essentially my like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe for SQL, or for the people who are starting off in their data career and their data journey. A lot of us think that SQL should be the first stop. So yeah, I'm trying to build out sort of like ideally I'd have like the number one SQL thing that gets recommended to everyone who's starting on their data journey. That would be amazing. Um, but I'd love to build out something where I'm teaching everyone, and then the people that I teach would love to mentor and teach other people. So it's kind of like a infinite cycle or infinite game sort of approach. So yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, props to you for building a huge community. That's awesome,
thanks
and the
so
fact
much,
it
man.
happened organically too, right? I mean, I think that's like every marketer's dream that you just happen to stumble into it. I think a lot of it's, from what I noticed, is you're genuine and you care, right? And you're cultivating, I think, a sense of um, growth and opportunity with people. So yeah, and the fact you could build this Slack community as well is very impressive. So that's awesome.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I noticed it's kind of funny. Like our circle, I think all of us are making like respective courses, but it's interesting too because I see it as like um, it's still you can still have a growth mindset within everybody, right? So like because when you're educating people, it's people want the people who are being educated, they want different perspectives maybe, or they want to learn maybe a different angle on something. And so that's what I like about this versus consulting, where it's very much a zero sum game. It's like you get a contract, I get a contract, but we're
Mm.
not both getting contracts, and that's kind of how it is. And like I definitely empathize with where you're going because I'm going through the same thing right now with our business. We're moving more towards kind of training. Cloud and data engineering training stuff, but it's
Mm.
all the same thing, right? But yeah, on the same wavelength for sure. It's just because the consulting gigs are just, I mean, they're fun, but at the same time, it's
Yeah, it's
you know.
consulting. Like it's I sometimes feel that I'd love to do training for companies and different things like that, where
Hmm.
I kind of repurpose whatever my SQL thing is for a specific domain or a specific company and use their data as like the actual data that all the content is based off. I
Hmm.
think that would be really cool. But
Yeah.
there's always a trade off in terms of the time and energy that I spend working for, let's say, a company where they're paying
Yep.
me relatively higher rate or something, compared to me working on something which could be scaled out to potentially hundreds of thousands of people,
Yep.
which would be really amazing.
Hmm.
I think that's always on my mind these days after making the switch to focusing on helping individuals instead of trying to make the rich get richer sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting trade-off. I mean, I don't know about you, but what I find is like um, any engagements that I do in consulting now has a training aspect to it. Like we want to teach people existing teams, right? Like when I say we're getting out of consulting, it's like the typical services stuff where we're there,
Mm-hmm.
just hours for dollars type stuff. We want to definitely train teams to work without us and stuff. And yeah, I think you're right. Like the thing I told my business partner was, look, anything we do from now on, we have to focus on scaling, right? Because to your point, there's a lot of people out there that want to learn. You mentioned 100,000. It's making a million, 10 million.
Mm.
There's, the people who want to learn the data skills that you and I have, for example, that it's a big market and there's a lot of
Mm.
opportunity to help people and help people level up their skills. So
Yeah. Like sometimes I feel that there's so it's sort of a little bit taboo to talk about this, but there's a lot of let's say like influencers or experienced data professionals who essentially they've been in the game for a few years, they've reached a relatively senior level, and then they kind of break off to do courses because they see it as like a what's the word, passive income stream, or they're trying to become an influencer or an entrepreneur, or they want to
yeah,
go digital nomad or whatever it is. And it's like it's definitely for me when I wanted to do all of this before in my career, I always thought of it as like, oh, that's the pinnacle, because then it's sort of like I'm no longer trading my time for money. I get to help people. I can make a lot of money because the scale and everything is there. But when you start going down that route and thinking through, okay, um, how do I price things? How do I have a positive impact? How can I do this for the long term? How do I not sacrifice actually helping people for making money and different things like that? Because now I see like there's a lot of people making new courses. I feel that the mindset for a lot of these people are like not everyone. This is maybe just my feelings, but
right.
it might be a bit short-termed thinking. Like everyone seems to be like, there's a gold rush. I need to sell a shovel before someone else sells a shovel in my
Yeah,
place, sort of thing. Um, whilst I feel for a lot of the people with like a larger vision or a longer term thing, they want to kind of like build communities, foster everyone's learning journey for the whole thing. Because like once you do a course, like it's not like it stops there. Like there's so many other things that you can learn and upskill in and continue combining all these different skills to really shape what your own like individual personality is as well. So I feel
yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah. I
a little
mean,
bit taboo.
yeah, I don't know if it's taboo at all. I mean, I think it's good to call it out, right? I mean, um, I mean, you and I have talked about like data charlatans before, and and taboo maybe, controversial maybe, but I mean, it needs to be said. But I think the marketplace will also dictate kind of the direction, people's success goes. And if you have great material and people want to buy it, then I guess it feeds on itself. Then,
Mm,
as you say, if you're successful with your course, well, guess what? You get to spend a lot of time doing. You get to make your course better or work on new material, and so it's like, um, I know for any of the trainings that I've done, for example, it's like it doesn't really stop. I mean, you have to keep making it, fresh and interesting, right? And work on
mm,
tweaks and whatnot. And but that's like anything in business, right? I mean, I think competition's good, and the marketplace just at the end of the day, it's a voting machine, and long term, it's a weighing machine or whatever, right? And so
mm,
it's quality survives, and I think people who like yourself, who are out there building communities, and I think putting in the extra effort, it's, your investment will pay off, right? I mean, it's easy to set
Mm.
up Podia and make a course, but there's a lot more to it, I think, as you and I know. So,
Yeah. I actually jumped on a call with Leo, one of the guys from Super Data Science.
oh, nice.
And we're having a chat about like what it takes to actually build a successful course, build a big following who are aware of the course and what you're doing, and actually get good recognition out of. Let's say someone finishes your course. How do you actually get that to be like a well recognized qualification almost? But yeah, when I was chatting with him, Leo was super surprised that I was doing everything myself. And part of it was, it's not like a boastful sort of thing, but I've been struggling to do everything because when people think of like, oh, I'm going to do an online course, like I'm going to throw it up on Udemy, record a few videos, do some video editing, make a curriculum, and do all of that stuff. It's not that simple. There's a lot more stuff that goes on in the background. And like, for example, responding to emails, I think the Super Data Science team has maybe maybe a few people on hand just to respond specifically to one course's emails. And then they have like a whole marketing team, a copy team, their website team. There's lots of different things. And for me, when I was starting off, I wanted to challenge myself to do all of it myself. Maybe it's like, I think it's like a sadomasochism sort of thing. Like growing up, I always challenged myself to do whatever I could at a really high level, and just kind of bled over into my professional and personal life too. But I think for me, it's very fulfilling to know that, okay, the input of my time and effort and experience to build something which could be scalable and could actually help a lot of people. It's sort of like you get back what you put in, sort of thing. When I was working in corporate, it didn't feel like the trade-off was so clear.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'd be smashing some project that could potentially make your company millions of incremental dollars every single year. But you would never, like, you might get like a note of praise or something from the CEO,
Right.
best case scenario, a bit of a bonus bump.
Yeah.
So the trade-off is definitely not there. Whilst for me, I always felt, okay, I always wanted to put in as much effort as I could into any project, because I think that's how a lot of us are when we're working. Like we always want to try and do our best. I feel that there's a lot of people like us out there who are like really putting in long hours, all of their energy into something which might not necessarily give them the returns that they're expecting.
Right.
So yeah, in a way,
Yeah.
I've just been really lucky just to kind of fumble my way into something that I enjoy doing. I'd love to keep doing this for a long time because it's just fun. Like these days, I don't think of work as work. It's fun,
I mean,
essentially.
you've hit nirvana, and I feel that the same way about the work that I do too. I mean, it doesn't feel like work. I mean, when you wake up, and when you go to bed and then wake up again, all the things that you've done during that time, it's not like you're sitting there like, and when you have a day job, right, and you're working for corporate, you've been there. It's just you think about just really dumb things, like silly things. I mean, they're necessary things, but at the end of the day, you're like, why am I obsessing over satisfying these people, right?
Mm,
Like I know I need to do a good job and all that, and that and people like you and I have a good work ethic, and we'll get things done. But at the end of the day, you look back and like, well, like what's the opportunity cost of all
mm,
that? Where could I have been better spending my time and attention and and it is a leap of faith to go out and start a business, right? Because you have to take a very uh, big bet on yourself, and so you have to have confidence. If you lack confidence, you should probably find some real quick, because starting a business and running one is not for the faint of heart. And that's also a thing I think you pointed out is there's this like hustle culture out there, right? Like I'm going to start my lifestyle business and get my Bitcoin course out there and talk it up on Clubhouse and all this. I mean, basically, you're playing businessman, right, or businesswoman, or whatever. You're like a entrepreneur, and like it's the amount of investment it takes to actually make a legit business, like the time investment and the personal commitment to do it can't be understated enough. And so I know when you're in a day job, it's tempting to dream about making the exit, getting a van, driving around, you know, living your best life and all that kind of stuff. And it's my advice is definitely just understand it, do it right. It's hard work, and it's not like you're out of the trading your time for money trap. It's just you're trading your time for other stuff now, right? And there's a point where you're not going to be making much money, and that's a fact when you're starting out. So you just gotta um, get to that trough of despair, I suppose, as it is, and just rough it out and get to the other side, and just stick with it. And so,
Yeah, definitely. I feel that for me, my trough of despair was when I stopped my day job and
hmm
there was no money coming in
yep,
and I was living off my savings. And it's almost like every single day that you're not launching something or you're not progressing whatever you're working on is like a day lost of whatever my day rate was before.
right,
So that for me, that was really tough mentally because like I'd never been unemployed or I've never been out of a job.
or consciously unemployed, like
Yeah,
intentionally.
consciously unemployed for any amount of time throughout my career. I've been really lucky. So yeah, that was really challenging for me. And early on, I had my doubts of like, okay, do you really want to do this? How long can you sustain yourself? And then my partner was also like giving me a lot of shtick as well in the background because so she would just be like introducing herself as like, oh, I'm the breadwinner. Like she's been saying that for like the last 6 months or so. It's always funny.
Yeah, I mean,
But there's yeah.
hopefully your partner was supportive too, along the way, and I
Mm,
mean, because that's a big factor of it. So
yeah, very supportive. So I've been
that's
very
cool.
lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes so when we talk about like the hustle culture and everyone like, oh, go become an entrepreneur because like everyone should be running their own business or different things like that that always get like thrown out there in popular media. Like
hmm
there's this whole idolization of big name entrepreneurs like your Elon Musks, all the other like super people essentially,
hmm
um, which the media always puts on a pedestal. But when you ask those people about like, okay, what sort of challenges have you had to overcome or different things that they've gone through in their lives, we realize that everyone is like they're just ordinary people. They've just done more things or they've like really had to go through big struggles to get to where they are. And no one like it seems like everyone kind of like extracts that tough component and then you only see the end.
Right.
And that's what everyone has like that's the goal. I want to become like super mega successful CEO of my own company. Then I'll be set for life or something like that. I think it's like it's good in one sense because I feel that we should be having more entrepreneurs.
hmm
Like there should be more new businesses, more innovation, more dedication of our lives to building something great that could actually help a lot of people, whether you're employing them or whether you're building a product that actually helps people as well. But the downside is there's bound to be a lot of people who kind of like fall into the trap of, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm very set. They quit their day job. They don't have a backup plan because everyone says you can't have a plan B, otherwise you'll fail
Yeah.
plan
Burn your
A sort of
bridges,
thing.
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do everything that you can to force yourself onto this one path. And then when they get on the path, they realize, oh man, this is not what I signed up for. Like I didn't, like I'm not getting paid for 6 months. I'm working 18-hour days. I don't have a weekend. Like all of these things, like people should talk more about and more openly
hmm
and kind of talk through the struggles of actually owning your own business because not everything is going to be smooth sailing,
No, in fact,
especially
I
not
would
from
say
day
nothing
one.
is. You shouldn't count on it. It's, um, everything's going to take you, 2 to 3 times longer than you think it's going to take. And you're just going to have to prioritize ruthlessly, right? So, there are some, I mean, how I divide my days and weeks is really mornings are spent for creative work or things that require mental cycles because you only have so many mental cycles where you can make quality decisions
Mm,
during the day, and then that craps out. Then it's just like take care of whatever admin stuff you need to take care of, emails, all that stuff. And then furthermore, at least for me, I dedicate like, you know, certain days of the week. Monday's usually an admin day and meeting day. I try and stuff all the meetings into Monday, maybe Tuesday, just so you can get those out of the way. And then the rest of the week, just focus on, more strategic stuff, creative stuff, and set aside the time for that because, uh, just things like this, I think you're going to have to think about when you start a business, right? Like, how are you going to use your time? Like, you can make more money. You'll never get time back, and time is your most valuable asset as a business person. And it's also easy, especially when you're starting out. I think it's probably pretty easy to squander it because you waste a lot of time playing business, right? I think really quickly you realize, you're not making any money, so. Do stuff that matters, do stuff that moves the needle, get comfortable selling because you're going to be selling a lot. If you can't sell, you're not going to have a business, right? If you can't market, you're probably not going to make sales, which means you're probably not going to have a business. So, I mean, it's interesting too for people in the data or tech space who want to become entrepreneurs. I mean, the thing I usually coach or at least advise people is like get out of your comfort zone and start selling. Read books on sales, start talking to people, just get out there. Don't be afraid to make a fool out of yourself because you will, and just get past those humps. Learn to communicate like very succinctly and in a way that's going to at least get people interested. All these things, right? But you don't know these things until you're out there, right? I know a lot of MBAs who even go and try to start businesses, and that's that's probably the worst degree you can get to start a business. It just teaches you like how to run an existing company. It teaches you nothing about starting something from scratch. So
Yeah, I feel, sometimes in the past I've read books where it's like, if you want to have an MBA, like an alternative MBA, go start your own business. I think that's like, there's a lot of truth in that. There was another thing that was flowing through my mind recently where it was, so in the past, right, I used to be like, anytime I got feedback in terms of, let's say, my manager giving me formal feedback or someone giving me feedback through some other unofficial avenue or whatever it is, in the past, I used to be like, I'd say quite defensive over like whatever I did. Of course, it was the best thing that was possible because I did it. And like whatever feedback that you're giving me is like full of crap because you clearly don't understand what I was going for, sort of thing. So that was in the past. And then now I realized, okay, one of the most important skills for any business person, entrepreneur, even as like a data professional, is the ability to take on quality feedback. But then there's an additional next level skill where you kind of, okay, there's feedback from all these different people. Can I try and contextualize this sort of feedback so then I can analyze and assess whether I want to include this feedback in my view of the world, and how can I actually take on the feedback and grow from it, as opposed to just dismissing it instantly because it doesn't sound right or you don't agree with it. So yeah, just something that's been flowing through my consciousness. I was writing a post about like, if you can't take feedback, maybe you shouldn't think about being an entrepreneur.
I think there's a lot of
it's true, but a bit harsh at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's harsh, but again, I think we need to have more of these candid conversations just about the realities of the situation too. Because the marketplace is a big feedback mechanism too, right? Like and that's why I think it's good. You need to get feedback early and often, right? Being told that maybe you need to make a few tweaks and here's some suggestions from various parts of the marketplace is preferable to you spending a lot of time building something and launching something nobody wants. Like a very wealthy friend of mine said once when I asked him, "Oh, so how do you make a lot of money?" And he's like, "Well, just sell people stuff that they want to buy." I'm like, "There's actually a lot of truth to this," and that's really complicated, but it was the best advice I'd heard because it's definitely true. Like people aren't going to spend money on stuff they don't want to buy. It's as simple as that. And so the feedback is your best mechanism to dial that in. You get to the point where you figure out what people want to buy, and that's your first step as a business. And it's not your only step, but like just if you don't have that, in popular vernacular, it's product market fit.
Mm,
But if you don't have that, and you don't have anything, right? You'll make money in spite of yourself. So,
mm.
because I think what would happen is like if you're selling something and people buy, but maybe it's not how you intended it to be bought, then that can
Yeah,
also happen. But
something you
it's
don't want to fall into too.
right, yeah, it's get reappropriated.
Yeah.
So
That
yeah,
always surprises me. So like whenever I'm on YouTube, right, they always have these ads about like, oh, did you know you can become like an Amazon drop shipper or blah blah blah, or like you can buy goods from Alibaba and then you ship it on Amazon. You can make a lot of money because there's a lot of there's a high margin or whatever it is. Everything's automated. Like I really think that those aren't helping the situation. Like
no,
there's everyone's trying to sell the dream. Like when you read any of like the entrepreneur 101, like let's call it like grade one entrepreneurship, they're always telling people when you do the marketing, you have to sell people on the journey, or like here's where you are and here's where you can become, and here's how little effort you need to do and follow the path or whatever it is. And a lot of it really ticks me off sometimes. Like
hmm
I I don't know whether it's because I've read more books that taught me to be critical, or whether I talk with my dad too much because he was always very critical, or different things like that, where it just led me to be very critical. And whenever I have like this has probably landed me in a lot of hot water in the past when I was working in corporate. But I people would ask me for feedback, and I'd just give them feedback like pure and unfiltered because I thought that that was what they wanted because that's what they're asking for, right? But I fell into that trap many, many times, where it's kind of not been received very well in the same way that I didn't like to receive feedback at the same time. So I just didn't have the awareness to actually work around it.
oh,
But
trust me, I've done the same thing many times. Yeah, and I try and balance it too. Like anymore, I'm definitely working on, I think better better ways of providing feedback. But at the same time, you got to balance it because you're not going to give some like bullshit feedback. Like,
mm,
do a better job. Or the worst is, oh, that's great when you really don't think it's great. Right now, it's just kind of a
mm,
brush off.
it just doesn't. Yeah, it just doesn't help anyone if
No,
you tell them the wrong thing.
I mean, if it's somebody I care about, like I'll give them pretty candid feedback and I'll preface it with whatever I need to preface it with. But um, I mean, because you shouldn't hold if you do care about somebody and where this feedback could potentially either help them or at least help them deviate from a pothole or worse. Um, hopefully they'll thank you. But I think it's as much like learning how to give feedback as it is learning how to accept feedback. I know I was the same as you. I'd be very defensive about some feedback I'd get and get all up in arms about it. Because I'm like, well, I'm obviously the smart one here, and this
Mm,
is the way this should be done. And no, that's actually totally wrong. Sometimes you end up finding out you're right, but it's not for the reasons you think. And so it's just yeah, but again, like as I tell people, the marketplace is going to be a lot harsher on you than this feedback. And so if you can't even accept this, potentially sugar coated or, lukewarm, but honest feedback. Imagine what spending a bunch of money and time and getting no sales tells you. If you want to go with that route and want to ignore some advice, feel free. Just
mm.
the consequences of that, I would say just be prepared for because emotionally it's going to sting a lot worse than what I just told you. So,
Yeah, like the market is the market, right? So
mhm.
if you're doing good things and people are buying the things that you're putting out there, or people are, let's say you're posting on LinkedIn, and let's say that that's the product that we're doing, like trying to build our own personal brand or something. If you find that people are like interacting well with your content, or if they're resharing your content, that's great. But if you're not getting a lot of likes or not getting as much traction as you'd
Mhm.
um, like I fell into the same trap before. So I'd post out like some fire memes that I thought were amazing. Then like no one would view them, no one would like them. And I'd be like, oh, what the hell, man? Like the algorithm's broken or whatever. Like I'd always be finding something to blame. Um, and then when you actually take that feedback to say, okay, I tried this, it didn't work. what can I try to make it work? And when you have that sort of like, let's call it experimentation mindset, or like a growth mindset, or whatever it is, where you're just kind of constantly trying to test and learn, that's like, I think that's probably the maybe like business level two, or like the next level of how we operate in business. So a lot of the times, like when, let's say we're a worker, we're working in a corporate or something, you just kind of, you take instructions from your boss or manager and you try and please them. The next level would be, okay, you take the instructions and then you try what they recommend, but then you come up with some new things that you could test, or different things that you can learn from and then recommend it. Or I don't know where I'm going with this, but sort of like iterating with each step and trying to make things better is like definitely something which is very important. I think the more we can foster this sort of mindset, not just for our work, but for our professional and personal lives too, I think that's where everyone will see a lot more growth.
Hmm. Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, how many people do you think are really going to go out and start a business?
Mm,
Right? I mean, I think I agree. I think it'd be great, but it's just, and kind of loop it back to corporate. I just don't know that it's just hard work, right? So, and plus you got to have the means to step out
mm,
and do it, and it's just because even if you wanted to, I don't think a lot of people, could last that long just financially for a lot of reasons. So
yeah,
it's
that's true
hard,
as well.
you know.
Like we must have been in a very lucky position to actually move out and start our own thing. Like the
Yeah,
stars had to align to actually give us the opportunity to do what we're
hmm,
doing now.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's not. Yeah, it's just I don't think a lot of people could do that. Take a take a chance on that, right? Because either like I would say the best time to do it is probably when you're young, which
mm,
we both aren't right now. But but if you were to at least any you have nothing to lose, and so it's kind of like because it's almost ironic in a lot of ways as you keep building up your career, you get the golden handcuffs and it actually becomes like way harder
mm,
to
mm,
take the leap, and you have the crux of unless your thinking is very flexible and you're able to take feedback and adapt very quickly, it'll be really hard actually because you're gonna think, oh well, because I've been successful in corporate land, I can be successful as an entrepreneur, and like that is
mm,
not a good recipe for success. And plus, you start getting things like mortgages and maybe kids and expensive toys and expensive habits, and taking expensive vacations, and everything adds up. And I know people that make a lot of money, with their salaries and still somehow don't have any savings,
mm,
and they couldn't go a month without a paycheck. It would be impossible. It would
mm.
be they'd be in bad shape. So part of that is being frugal, I think, and just maybe investing your money and just having a plan. Like for me, I always knew this was the plan, and my wife was on board, so we just kind of made this happen. But there's a lot of things that need to fall into place. But again, that's not to say this is the only way. Like what you and I are doing. Obviously, people go and start businesses all the time and are successful, and people start businesses all the time and are very unsuccessful, and that's just how it is. So
Mm.
um, there's not one way to do it. Especially these days when you can get venture funding, I think it makes it, I would say, on one hand, simpler in the respect where you have money and you have runway. On the other hand, I think there's higher expectations on how you're going to have to perform.
On delivery.
Yeah, now you
I
have to make a
always
unicorn. So
always need the unicorn to get more money as well.
right, but it's kind of like not every idea is going to be a unicorn. It's just like how it is, and I mean, you can try and make up reasons why it's going to be a unicorn, but that requires some very inventive storytelling. So,
Like I was actually talking to a mate in Australia where he's got a friend who recently got some venture capital funding, like 500,000 Australian or something, to essentially build like an education startup, which is essentially what I'm doing, but I'm not asking anyone for any money. But
yeah,
there he was suggesting, oh, you should talk to this dude because he might be interested in having you build a course for them. or something like that. Which got me thinking, like, oh, if some people are asking for money to kind of do like a very general online experience education sort of thing, like it's pretty crazy. Like, I don't, for me personally, I wouldn't ask for venture funding because I want to try and make it on my own, and then you have more control and ownership or whatever have you like for your company. But there's always people who, like, there's this whole glamorization of like, oh, you need to get seed funding as soon as possible because that's when, like round A funding or whatever it is, because that's when you make it, sort of thing. Like, yeah, it's very interesting. I think like the Facebook films and different things and all the different stories that you hear about Silicon Valley propagates that sort of belief as well.
Yeah, it certainly does, right? And then every TechCrunch article or VentureBeat or just seeing, whatever fundraising comes out in the press, it's, yeah, I totally agree. And it's very glamorized, but, I mean, it's always like survivorship bias, right? Because for every one of those,
100%.
how many have just, died not even a fiery death, just like a cold, dank, dark death in a cardboard box in a back alley somewhere. It's like nobody even notices or cares, right? It's just that happens too, and it sucks, but it's and that's why I think you just need to be realistic about how things are. When you set up your business and your goals, like that's key. And then don't be afraid to start small. Like I think it's more like I think growing too fast or trying to I think act bigger than you are. There's there's a time and place for it, but in a lot of cases, the failures I've seen with entrepreneurs is when they, I think they didn't dial it back, and I think proceed intelligently and said it like you go from like playing little league soccer or football in your country to playing in the pros like the next day, or rugby is probably a better analogy actually. And then you just get stomped, right? Like there's a certain learning curve, to make it last longer. And then again, you get this crazy stuff like Clubhouse, that was started around COVID times, and now it's $1 billion valuation. So,
Yeah,
there's always
there's
counterexamples.
always going to be outliers, like outliers, exceptions, edge cases for all of whatever we're talking about. So
Yeah.
it's always interesting. Like, I find it really funny how every time there's like an outlier, so the first thing that everyone will say is like, oh, that's a black swan or whatever it is, like a very rare occurrence, like it's never going to happen again. But then the same people will go in and analyze exactly what made this thing happen, and
Right.
like analyze it to bits. So I find it like it's very, very interesting. And like people have a whole career based on that, where they're just analyzing these unicorn companies to see what made them so successful.
Well, yeah, and
And
it's always kind of like after the fact analysis, right? It's like this
yeah,
Malcolm Gladwell thing where it's like, well, people are successful because of like these reasons, and let me show you a bunch of anecdotal stories about it, or uh, like WeWork is a really good example, right? So when WeWork a few years ago was in its ascendancy and peak, a lot of stories were like, I mean, it's obviously a tech company. I mean, how could it not be? And it's it's obvious that everything they're going to focus on is like building this $100 billion or more company. They're going to take over real estate and everything else. And fast forward past the IPO, or not even IPO, they're about to IPO, and then everything just came in like crashing into a wall. And now the company's maybe worth a single digit billion, if even that. And but it was interesting listening to the rationalizations about its valuation at the time. Like, oh, it's obviously worth this much money because of these reasons, right? And so obviously
yeah,
not, because it wasn't. But
yeah, like there's we both read like a lot of Nassim Taleb and all these like
right,
alternative thinking sort of stuff, which is like, I think it's quite like a lot of people read the same books, but they don't kind of embody the same sort of critical thinking. Maybe it's because we work in data and we've seen a lot of bad stuff happening where like these sorts of biases and different things that people overlook like actually have a significant impact on whatever we're working on. But I feel that more like they should be required reading for anyone who wants to move into data science or statistical thinking or anything like that,
Totally
because
agree.
it kind of like we're very attuned to, okay, XYZ applied this sort of statistical thinking or statistical paradigm to this to solve this problem. Um, let's identify where it could go wrong first before we go and confirm whether it was correct. Things like that, like, doesn't really get taught. Like in universities, we're definitely not taught to think like that. And you only get you. I realized that like the way that I learned it was because we made so many mistakes in the past that we developed this sort of like list of things that we should know before we actually go and continue with whatever we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a learn from mistakes sort of thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, real life is gonna charge you a lot of tuition, and you should gladly pay it if you're paying attention. If you aren't paying attention, then I guess you just paid tuition and didn't learn anything, which is kind of like going to college. So, but snarky answers aside, right? It is a lot of these lessons. So you kind of do have to learn them the hard way, and I do agree. I think Taleb, and authors like that. Yeah, I think data scientists should definitely read those, and I would require them. If I had a curriculum, I just think it teaches you. Obviously, the fat tails thinking teaches you some really good patterns, but it also serves as a good reminder that what you see in front of you and what you hear from the crowds around you may be a hallucination, right? And sometimes it does pay to second guess things, even when you might be considered unpopular or a naysayer for doing so. Like I remember this time last year, and a couple months before, I was getting ready for COVID coming to the U.S. This is probably January, early to mid January, because I started hearing in Asia, something's like Wuhan was getting shut down. It's like China doesn't shut down cities for anything, so that's weird. And noticing that we weren't stopping any flights anywhere in the world, it's like, well, okay, this is going to be here. And so back then, I was buying extra stuff, food and whatever else, and canceling events. So events that we were supposed to go to in April, canceled, and people were like, "Why are you doing this?" I was like, "Well, I don't know, but I don't know if we want to be on the hook for a bunch of conference money if this thing goes south either." And they're like, "You're crazy." I was like, "Well, we'll find out. If not, I'll just buy the ticket when it's more expensive." And then, yeah, actually this week is when the U.S. shut down last year, and I started getting emails from people, those same people who said you're crazy. And it's like, what? Like how did you know?
Are you a fortune teller?
Yeah, I'm
What
like,
crystal
it
ball
wasn't.
brand do?
It's not being a I'm like, I'm not a fortune teller, but it's just when you start seeing, large scale events happening somewhere in the world. The world's a very small place these days, and like a ripple in China can obviously affect places like Australia, where you are. It can affect the U.S. In a matter of weeks, and things can change real fast. And like that to me was, I wouldn't call it a black swan moment, but it was pretty damn close in the sense where this is just it's an inflection point event. There's the world like before COVID, and there's the world after, and they're not the same, and they'll never be the same. And so, and if you were ready, you at least had a head start on stuff, right? And so, but there's many of these out there, and who knows? I have no idea what a lot of these are. You don't, but when you see something, and I think when you can take an opinion that's very contrary, to me that's a good start towards developing independent thinking, kind of what we just talked about. So.
Yeah. I remember when this whole thing started, like I don't want to talk too much about the whole COVID stuff or whatever, but I remember I was in Vietnam in January, like end of January, when all the shit started happening. And then instantly my brain was like, yeah, this is not good. We're pretty close to China.
Right.
Fights are still going on. So I was like in like full on panic mode, like in January. And then I came back to Australia and started like preparing myself and doing all sorts of stuff. And everyone was calling me crazy. Like my family was calling me crazy. My girlfriend was calling me crazy. All my friends were like, why are you doing this? And then I just told them, you'll see, or like
Yeah,
something
but you
along
sound
those
like a
lines.
crazy
Like,
person when you say that, right? You're like, oh,
yeah,
you'll find out, right? And they're like,
like
what?
like I did tell them because I remember early on they had all these videos and stuff coming up which were all unverified, but then like I found them to be pretty compelling and whatever. It was all on Reddit and Twitter and different things like that. They kept
Mm,
getting taken down. So my mind was like, oh, if things are being taken down, surely something is
right.
going amiss, because if it was just a normal video, no one would be taking it down or doing anything. So yeah, there was an analogy to this is when I'm driving in my car, right? It tells me where all the speed cameras are. So no one should be speeding when they're driving, but when you're over the specific speed limit and the camera is coming, my car has like it plays these sounds. So one sound is like dun dun, where it just tells you that there's a speed camera coming up, and then there's another sound which is like a high pitch like dun, where it just like tells you that like okay, you're over the speed limit. Slow down. There's a camera coming. And for me, it's like that same analogy was what was going on whenever I take in like new information about COVID or any other situation. There are just certain triggers that kind of like kick off this, let's call it intuition or gut feeling or whatever it is, that triggers that same like gut instinct of like, okay, something is not right here, or like, oh,
Yeah.
warning, something is coming up. And this applies to like not just like day-to-day stuff or whatever, like when you're driving or when you're cooking something or whatever, but it applies the same for work as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
I found over time you develop all these patterns of let's call them like classification patterns, essentially, where your algorithm has like figured out like, oh, these certain events happening in a row correlate very highly to something happening afterwards, so you should be aware of it. um yeah, I just thought it was like an interesting analogy of like to think about how the machine learning works and how our brains work and
Mm-hmm.
intuition works. Because no one, like everyone says how like, oh, you can't teach intuition, you learn it from experience, sort of thing. Which I think is true, but if you learn from other people who've developed really high intuition, that's even better because you get to
Right.
learn and leverage, like stand on the shoulder of giants, sort of thing.
Well, that's why reading is important, right? Like reading books
Mm,
and um, increasingly watching videos and stuff, watching interviews with people like us. But
of course.
it's, of course, um, but yeah, I mean, you can go through the same mistakes. Like I know one person who says, "Oh, why do I need to read books? Like I can write my own book." And I was like, "Yeah, but your book's gonna be like full of a lot of the mistakes that are in like the other 100 million books that are out there. Like, why don't you just maybe try and learn stuff?" And you're right. Yeah, intuition is an interesting thing. I think you can develop, but learning can help you accelerate kind of developing a spidey sense for stuff. Like it's no substitute for like sticking your hand on the hot stove, for example. But
Mm,
knowing to
mm,
avoid the hot stove in the first place might be maybe better advice. In the first place, like uh, you wear seatbelts for a reason, right? Like it's not like you have to experience a horrible car crash to know that you should buckle up. Um, People just do it and it becomes habit. And I think much the same way, to bring it back to business and kind of being a domain expert too, like, you're in a field long enough, you do develop an intuition about when things are off. That can also, I think, make you you definitely have to balance that with like keeping a flexible mind though, and understanding like when things seem off but for reasons that don't make any sense at all, right? Like I remember during the financial crash in 2008, I was hired on this company to do forecasting, and right, like I think the week the economy started crashing actually, so that was interesting. Uh, and so I mean I've been doing forecasting for a long time, but I think I also realized like a lot of the techniques that you could apply in an economy where things were somewhat predictable had like no bearing whatsoever. Time series analysis wouldn't mean anything in this situation because like consumer spending just fell off a cliff. This was for an e-commerce company, and so what you need to understand is, okay, so what are the if you understood like consumer behavior, for example, right? Like how are people going to respond to this? Like maybe even emotionally, right? That was I think the first time I realized like in data science, there's more to it than just pattern matching, right? Like empathizing with a customer and understanding kind of what they're going through, what they might spend their money on, what they might not. At least trying to take a guess at that. I think that and looking at data points to support that, so things outside the realm of like a traditional time series data, but looking at you know web data and every other data, and just reading a lot of anecdotal stuff. That I think that saves that situation. So
Yeah, I definitely agree in terms of having a wider range of life experience usually lends to like being able to contextualize and analyze problems in the right mindset. I don't know if mindset is the right term, but like to kind of analyze data in the context where it's happening and then be able to do your insights and do whatever. But then when you finally have the final deliverable, or say you're presenting about what's going on, you better hope that you know what's going on at that time, because otherwise, like, there's bound to be someone with a higher level of commercial acumen or like high level thinking who will just call you out for it and be like, "Oh, did you think about customers buying less because now money is a thing? Like, we can't go willy nilly spending our money everywhere because everything is uncertain," or different things like that. Like, I was recently reading a book called Range by
David Epstein.
David Epstein.
Yeah,
that was really good because it mirrored a lot of how I felt about my own life growing up as a kid. Like,
interesting.
For me, it was like my parents were very easygoing. I'd say my dad was more easygoing, but very critical. Always gave me lots of feedback on whatever I was doing wrong. Never really praised me, sort of thing. Like old school, like Asian dad sort of thing. My mum was like the one who needed me to focus on my academics, but they always let me try whatever I wanted to try. Mm-hmm. So when I was young, I was like, oh, I want to play cricket, which is like big sport in India, Australia, all over the world, essentially.
Yeah.
But back in the day, there was like, you don't see any Asian youngsters playing cricket in Australia. It's like, it's just not a thing. We should be playing piano or something else, doing math, something more stereotypical.
Yeah.
But my parents were fully supportive. So I played cricket. I played all the Australian sports. So I played like cricket, rugby league. It helped that I was larger as a kid as well. So I was like about double the size of everyone else who was my age, because I just ate a lot. And then I played musical instruments. I did I essentially, whatever I had an interest in, had like a very obsessive personality where I just try and get really, really good at it. Mm-hmm. And then over time I graduated. I had all these like different, like I learned how to play guitar, playing trumpet, playing piano, all these different things which like are totally unrelated. When I was at the gym, I'd learn how to we always talk about gym as well, but I did like weightlifting. I learned how to do a snatch. I played some golf. I don't know why I did all of these things. I just felt like it. And then now when I'm working and going through all these things, I realize that, having learnt so many things, I've actually developed a skill to be able to learn things quickly. And it's not like learning textbook stuff. Like, anyone can read through a textbook and flip through it and kind of learn learn how to do something. But not when you need to like show up and play a performance live on guitar in front of 1,000 people or whatever. If you're singing in front of someone, different things like that. There's much more, you get more feedback essentially. Mm-hmm. I realized that the feedback mechanism of, okay, I'm going to start learning this thing. I'm going to be absolutely trash for like the first few months. I just need to stick through it and get to the other end. If I can keep that mindset for everything else, then...
That's such a good point.
Yeah. And I feel that so going back to the book, The Range by David Epstein, he talks about how there's like, essentially in the first chapter, I think they were talking about Roger Federer and Tiger Woods, like the two different ways of people who could grow up and become amazing superstars. So Tiger Woods was like an ultra specialization person where they
born to golf, basically.
Yeah. And like trained to play golf, and from a really young age, like he was holding a golf club at 1 year old or maybe even younger. whilst Roger Federer kind of played multiple sports and didn't really know what he was doing until he found the drive to just focus on tennis.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that that's probably how we should like how we should approach our careers in some sense.
Yeah.
Like our careers, our personal lives, professional lives. We don't really know what we're good at the beginning because we're actually bad at everything that we start with. And then over time, like you might become good at it, but whether you feel like the drive to continue being that person who is very good at this specific thing, that's something totally separate as well. And that's up to like, I feel that that's for everyone to decide on their own. So whenever I hear advice about finding your purpose or how do you find your ultimate career or different things like that, I'm always just like, next article. I'm not going to read that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as we were talking earlier, like, I think you and I, we found something that, at least for now, doesn't seem like work. And to me, that feels like a pinnacle of work, right? Where you found something where it isn't drudgery anymore. This is just something that is a part of you, right? And we talk about athletes, for example. I mean, I've been an athlete, in multiple sports, and in some sports, pretty damn good at it too. Not to be cocky, but it's true. But I think that the patterns I've learned to be successful in, something like climbing, where it's pretty decent at it, and transferring that to other sports. Like, I think you just learn patterns of success and patterns of failure, and so you learn. When you made the comment of like you learn how to learn, I mean that's so spot on because that when you start out with something, you realize like the basics, I have to get these down, like because everything's foundational. You're not going to go play in the pro leagues tomorrow. It takes some time. You're going to suck actually for a really long time because you have to get the basics. But the nice thing is, if you've experienced that a few times, you know what to expect, and your cycle shortens. Your ability to learn things continuously becomes quickly as you learn things quickly as well. So that's an added benefit, but and that to bring it to data science, you and I get a lot of advice from people about how do I start my career in data science, or how do I learn X, Y, or Z, or what are the things I need to learn, and and it varies by people. I don't think I ever give people like a cookie cutter answer because it's like I mean. It kind of comes back to what are you going to be interested in studying, for one, and stay motivated on. But two, I mean, there is requisite knowledge you're just going to have to learn, like stats and math and how machine learning algorithms work and all that kind of stuff. But I think you got to start where you're going to be most effective in learning and then add on the other stuff. Because if you start from the same point where everyone else does, your opportunity to make mistakes in a comfortable way, I think, kind of disappears. You might get discouraged and burn out. And so, but it's because everyone is approaching it from their own individual spot, right? There's nobody who's, because it's not just what you learned in school. It's also, like you say, your parents, right? Like how your dad gave you feedback that influenced how you accepted feedback when you're older, right? And how you give feedback and so forth. And it's in much the same way. All your life experiences, even outside the classroom, dictate like how you're going to pick things up, how are you going to learn, how are you going to deal with setbacks, and it's incredibly nuanced. And that's why, I don't know about you, but I can't really give like a blanket answer to people. I mean, I'll try, but I always caveat that with your individual mileage may vary by a lot. So
yeah, I always so. There's the concept of, how like all the professional sports players, for example, they always have a coach. Like you never see someone who doesn't have a coach, like very rarely. And you think to yourself, oh, why do they have a coach? Is it because they can, like, clearly there's a reason why they have a coach and that's why they're performing at the highest level, right? So in the same way, when I think of like, we talk a lot about like in data science, like there's a lot of hype about being self-taught. Like I wrote a post which was saying that I was self-taught, so I fell into the same trap. But I feel that everyone is self-taught to some extent. But if you really want to make it to the next level, you really need to have someone who coaches or mentors you to like and gives you that sort of personal feedback
Yep.
on how you yourself can improve. Like, oh, I realize that you learn things differently this way. You struggle with these things. Because when you're going through it yourself, like you usually don't have that level of awareness to think of all these things because you're too busy learning the damn thing or doing whatever you're doing.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's bound to be some, like Coursera is essentially like personalized online training. Like that was their vision, I
Mm-hmm.
think, from the beginning. Like, well, we're going to use all this data that we collect from people doing all the Coursera courses, and then we're going to build up some personalized education thing, which I think is awesome. Like that should be the future because,
Yeah.
like you were saying, like everyone learns differently. So let's say children, for example, some children might be more positive than others. Some might be able to accept harsher feedback. Some might just like you need to like baby them or be a bit more tender with the feedback. Otherwise, they won't grow and like become stronger in that way. So it's very nuanced, and I think that that's where I'd love to be in, like being able to influence and impact how people learn in the future. That would be amazing. Um, Even if I just start off in data, I think that's a place to be in because there's bound to be many more data people after us too. So
Oh yeah, I would hope so.
yeah.
Like coaching's interesting. Like my coach here, I use True Coach, and
Oh,
but
awesome.
he'll personalize lessons for me and stuff, or training regimes. You can't see anything, but we have certain goals, and so it's all personalized. And the nice thing with the coach is he'll take the time to customize things, right? Because I still go to the CrossFit gym once. I haven't been lately, but follow the programs and stuff just to try and keep up. But yeah, at a certain point, it's like I have individual goals I want to do this spring and summer, and it's like you're gonna have to take a different path because the general routine ain't gonna work for you if you want to get to what you want to be doing. And yeah, much the same way. I hope hopefully data coaching becomes a lot more nuanced in that regard.
Hmm.
Whether it's an automated solution or uh, a one-on-one data coach. I think there's always going to be a place for both. I mean, because the amount of the number of people getting into data, it's only growing. I mean, we're in a good field, but I feel like we're also just getting started too, because you have the broader scope of data literacy and all these other aspects too, which may not overlap with data science at all, but just making people data literate in organizations.
Hmm.
That's its own separate thread. And our buddy Dave Langer, he's doing a great job at I think trying to
He is
um,
doing awesome.
yeah, just bring it to the 750 million Excel users and so forth. So like I guess at the beginning too, it's cool because like the space we're in, even though we're all teaching people, it's not a zero sum game, right? Like your course, somebody buying your course doesn't mean somebody couldn't buy Dave Langer's course. Somebody buying Dave Langer's course doesn't mean they couldn't buy Person X's course or whatever, right? It's just it all
Hmm.
feeds in itself. I mean, because it's like how many books do you own?
Oh, like lost count. Don't
Right,
know.
exactly. So I mean, it's not like you buying one book means like that's the only book you're ever going to buy, and like that. I mean, I look around me and there's like machine learning books everywhere. They've had for years and years and years and years and years, and it just builds in itself because we're always learning
Hmm.
too, right? And so our learning facilitates newer content and newer ways of teaching people. So it's kind of cool. So
Yeah. Oh, on the thing about the zero sum game, also, like part of the reason why I wanted to move into the education space was because I realized that there were a lot of people selling really expensive courses,
hmm
and that kind of, I'd say, graded against me because it's like, on one hand, like we're always told in terms of pricing, like you need to charge what you're worth. If you charge more expensive, whatever your product is, people assume that there's more value and all that sort of stuff, like the marketing psychology and behavioral psychology sort of thing. But in the end, when I thought about it a bit deeper, it's like, okay, how many millions of people are there out there in the world who could learn data? Um, if you charge a higher price, you're sure you might have paying customers who pay the price of whatever you're charging, but then it limits the number of people who you could have a positive effect on.
right.
And there are definite benefits to this as well. Like you have more room for marketing, you have more time to build a better course, and there's lots of business positives for charging a higher price too. So I see where everyone is coming from. But for me, I wanted to like almost, how can I have the most impact in the most meaningful way? And I feel that a lot of others in our industry are along the same lines. And that's where we can do the zero sum, or we can do the not zero sum thing where,
Right.
like if, let's say my course is relatively cheap, Dave's course is relatively cheap, I can buy both and I can learn from both.
Mm-hmm.
But if, let's say we both charged $10,000 for
Right.
our services, like then it can be a zero sum game for a few people unless you have a lot of money.
Well, that's like going to two
So
colleges at the same time then, right?
exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
you could, I guess. Yeah, it's true.
And
And the nice thing is too with digital content, right? I mean, it's, you're scaling your knowledge out, and then it can lead up if somebody wants a personalized, Data with Danny one-on-one coaching. I mean, that's probably going to cost a lot more because now your time is worth a lot more, right? That might be $10,000 for coaching or more. But the point is now you can build a product ladder where this is the democratized, have at it, and so forth. This is kind of what we're doing with our business too, where access to us is, and we're starting to make digital content, which we'll start putting out soon. But it's just all the stuff we keep repeating to clients, best practices with X, Y, and Z technologies, or cloud best practices or stuff. Just make a video and just give it away, or package it up and sell it in the course, because people can get more benefit out of that. And if they still need personalized attention or strategy or something like that, then yeah, we'll work with you. But just because you recognize you can't be everywhere at once, but you can with content actually.
Yeah, it's like some people think of like the content strategy or whatever like it's a bad word. Like in some ways, like people think, oh, if you're focusing too much on your content, then you're not actually doing your job or whatever it is, or like you're not providing value or different things like that, which I think is crazy because
I agree.
It's like one of the different levers that you have to pull to actually have scale. Content is like almost your number one lever, unless like product development and strategy is very important too. But if let's say you build the world's best product and you're relying on referrals to actually build out your business and have scale, if you don't have a presence online, like on social media or on different things like that, good luck trying to scale out. You're essentially running up, what do we call? In Australia, there's like a saying where you're paddling up shit creek without a paddle.
Yeah. We have the same one here. Yep.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah.
You're essentially just like you're driving your car with the brake on, with the handbrake on. It's just not going to end well. So forgot where I was going with this. But yeah, I'm at the stage now where I realize that I literally don't even have time so before I was like being more active on LinkedIn, I'd try and make memes every now and then and just have fun. Like I found LinkedIn more as like my new social media time goes to that instead of going on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And I realized that I was actually wasting a lot of time on there. Like, even though I was like, I'm replying to comments and trying to interact with everyone on a one-on-one basis, and I'm posting meaningful content and doing all that stuff. But I felt that I was stuck in that like play businessman type approach, where I was just doing that because I felt that I needed to do it, but it wasn't actually driving the needle. So it forced me to think more about, okay, how do I use my LinkedIn presence, or how do I continue building out that network, but don't spend so much time, because I was spending a crazy amount of time on LinkedIn, much more than I should have been.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
So, I could make an argument too. If you weren't on there, I think in such a presence, you wouldn't be where you are today
that's
either,
true.
right? So,
yeah.
You are right, especially in when you're running a business, you got to be pretty ruthless with your time, because otherwise, you look 6 hours later, you're still on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
posting memes, and it's kind of like, so it's a balance, but I get it. I mean, I don't have nearly the following you do on LinkedIn, but I think it's, even with me responding to stuff, I have to definitely segment time out to, to respond to stuff, and it's just, I found bucketing time works because otherwise you keep getting these dopamine hits of like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
responding to likes, and then you're like, well, is there gonna be another like pretty soon? Like, I gotta be ready to respond to that, and you're just like, just forget all that, just focus on your work and hit the do not disturb button on your computer and just get to work. And at night, I shut off my phone. Like, after a certain hour, that's not visible at all. So, because otherwise you're gonna be just in dopamine central. And it's like the enemy of productivity is just being in that mental space. So.
Oh, same for you. You mentioned sleep as well, like shutting off all devices and doing all that sort of stuff. Like as an entrepreneur, like when you're working in your own business, there's a tendency to overwork. Like my biggest thing is that I can burn myself out if I'm not careful very, very easily because I can just sprint at like 100,000 miles an hour and just go, go, go. And like, I remember just before my beta launch, like around mid-February for my first course, I was like, the week before I stayed up 4 nights in a row and I was just like, I was essentially gone during the daytime, but I was working at nighttime. And after that, I was just exhausted. I was really burnt out, like straight after I released the thing. And I had to like almost take a week off straight after I released the initial like 60% of the course just to recover and recuperate so I can get back into it.
Right.
So I think sleep is like so important. Like I know people talk about like, oh, you don't need so much sleep. Like everyone sleeps like anywhere from 4 to 8 hours and everything is individualized and it's the quality of your sleep and whatever. But I found that for me, like I've always struggled with my sleep. Like when I was younger, like I'd just sleep random hours. I'd stay up late, like chatting on MSN. Shout out to the people who still know what MSN is. Or like doing all these like stupid things when I was young, and my sleep patterns were just a wreck. Like I would sleep at like 11, wake up at 6 or something for school. That's not too bad. Sometimes I'd stay up late. At uni, there were times where I just didn't sleep. Like you'd just be like an insomniac for like a month or something because you're too busy partying or doing whatever. And like I only really focused on my sleep probably in the last 2 years or so, where I realized that it was actually impacting like how I perform like at the gym or at work. Like I realized that there were days where I was just super energetic because I had a lot of sleep. Like my sleep was perfect the night before. And then there were other times where I wouldn't be able to sleep and I'd just feel absolutely horrible. So yeah, I think
a big one.
Yeah, people don't really consider sleep as like it's very, very important. I wanted to read a book about like why we sleep. There was like some medical, like all the different processes that happen
That's a
in
really
your
good book.
brain
You should read
and whatever.
it. Yeah.
Like,
but I'll give you the punchline, right? I don't think it's just sleep 8 hours. Like every chapter is like, why is it important to sleep 8 hours? Well, let's go into that real quick about this other angle of it. And I'm like, after reading through it about halfway through, I was like, let me guess, you're gonna tell me to sleep 8 hours again. And sure, so just because I think that the studies that the author had gone through was, there's some people that say that they can get by on 4 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep, and he's like, yeah, it's probably not actually. Like you're probably not that person because that's a really, really rare person. And you're actually probably like totally crazy because you don't sleep enough, and your body's going to break down and all this other stuff. Right. So I was much the same way as you, like just didn't figure, oh, sleep's like, I'll go sleep when I'm dead. Right. Like that's kind of the
that was my
attitude of it.
mentality.
Right.
Exactly. Like I'll sleep when I'm done. Like I'll finish it after the release or something. I'll sleep for 48 hours or something.
Yeah. And it's just, it's macho bullshit. Kind of response. I remember like a few years ago, polyphasic sleeping was like the cool thing where people would like be into that, and you're just like, come on. And then you look at these people who are doing polyphasic sleeping, they look like crackheads, and they just did not look good at all. So they're like, oh man, I feel so alert right now. I'm like, you do not look alert. You look like death, actually. So, but whatever you feel like, man. I'm not gonna sit there and get in your way either. So
Yeah.
it's a free country,
Like,
and
I feel for sleep, right? The biggest thing that impacted my sleep was caffeine. And we
hmm
were just talking about caffeine before we started recording. Like,
yeah,
caffeine is like very, very, very useful, but very, very dangerous at the same time. Like people I know, they have caffeine like at 10 p.m. just before they go sleep, and then they're always complaining, "Oh, I didn't get enough sleep," or like my sleep quality was terrible. Well, it's because caffeine was there in your system. Like, so nowadays, when I love coffee, like I drink
yeah,
way too much coffee, but I always like shut it off like right in the morning, and I just don't have any in the afternoon because coffee has like a half life of 7 hours or something like that, and any amount of it in your system interacts with different receptors in your brain,
hmm
which can stop you from sleeping well.
yeah,
So that was a real big thing. When I started controlling my caffeine intake, my sleep instantly got better. And then the next thing was to like stop looking at screens with lots
yeah,
of blue light
yeah.
at nighttime. So now I have like the flux filter on my computer. I'm wearing blue
Excellent.
light blocking lenses, trying to minimize as much screen time before bed as possible. I think that was the next like 20% of benefit that I received. Probably even more because like there's all these studies about how bad looking at light just before you sleep is
Yeah,
for your body. Like, yeah, when we think of like I always try and think back to nature, like our let's call it like our evolution or whatever, the paleo stuff or whatever it is. Like our bodies haven't really changed too much over time um, to adapt to all these things that are happening in our new environment. So if you think of like when we were all cavemen, like I don't think our bodies have changed too much, to be honest.
mm-mm.
Where once it goes dark, you have nothing to do unless you learn how to build a fire. Then you could be doing something else. But you would essentially go to sleep whenever it's dark, and then you wake up whenever it's light.
hmm
And I think if we did that more as like a society, we'd be way more productive during the waking hours
I think
because
so
we wouldn't
too.
be spending time like watching movies or doing a Netflix binge or something like at nighttime. So
Rage tweeting at 3 in the morning.
yeah, like
Like
there's just way too many distractions out there to yeah.
yeah, it's cool. Well, I think we're about up at time, but love to have you on again. I think we always have some conversations, whether they're recorded or not. It's always we always have a fun time. So, um,
Definitely.
yeah, I guess to close it out, how would people find out more about you and your courses?
Yeah, so for everyone who's interested in joining me for an online course or part of the Data with Danny community, you can go to datawithdanny.com. Nice and simple. I have one course which is on Serious SQL, which is still in a beta phase, but I think it's going to come out of the beta phase and do an official launch, hopefully by the end of this month or beginning of
Nice.
next month in April. Um, and yeah, follow me on LinkedIn is probably the main thing. So I think my profile is also called Data with Danny. So if you search like Data with Danny or Danny Mara in LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me. I hit the connection limit, so please follow because I've got a lot of connection requests which I can't respond to. And if you're interested in joining the community for Data with Danny as well, maybe we'll throw a link in the description, but you can join us on the Slack community. There's like 2,000 odd people on there now, so hoping to grow it into a larger thing and maybe turn it into like a new version of a friendly Stack Overflow or something where you can just ask questions whenever.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's it.
Well, cool. Well, Danny, as always, man, it's always good to chat with you. I feel like we could chat for days, and maybe when this
Yeah,
stupid
definitely.
pandemic's over, we'll meet up maybe in Australia or the States, and
Yeah. We'll
yeah,
probably
man,
go for a workout, go for feed,
yeah, for
and just
sure.
talk about weird stuff as well.
Yeah, as always. Until then, buddy. Yeah, we'll see you
Awesome,
soon.
man.
So
Take care.
take care. Bye bye.